friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Ellenvoss, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. I am so glad you're here. And today I have some fresh new content for you based on some deep research I've been doing into the archetype of the goddess from Old Europe. So if you're into digging around through ancient texts, looking at ancient symbols, today is going to be very exciting. And I'm going to give you some actual things to do and some plants that you can pair with these symbols. So that's where we're headed today. Before we dive into today's topic, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do. Just click that little button and that will help you to stay in touch with me and also to help more people find me and find this wonderful work of looking into our ancient herbal roots and exploring different symbols and archetypes from the ancient world and the modern world, because they're both places. I also wanted to let you know that my herbal apprenticeship will be starting April 24th, so there is still time to register. I'll share my screen with you and we'll go over to the Sky House Herbs website where you can learn more. So click on Sky House Herb School, and then you can go to the Herbal Foundations Apprenticeship. Here you will see all the things you need to see, including student referrals and recommendations. You can learn more about who is coming to this course, some of the highlights and topics. You'll get a list of here are the herbs that we'll be working with over the course of 12 months and each individual module. So you can see step by step what we're going to be covering in this course. Really, this course is designed for people of all skill levels and all experience levels. And it's really for anyone who wants to learn about the power and magic of herbal medicine, specifically from the Western herbal tradition. So I am a vitalist herbalist. And so my training comes from looking at herbs from the perspective of both the old world Europeans and also from the ancient Greeks. So you can learn more about me on the website. And here we've come to the enrollment page. So you can select different financial options. So we have just a regular one payment of $12.99, 12 payments, $120 per month. And if that is out of your budget, we do have need-based pricing. You can just click here to apply for tuition assistance. And this is a great option if you're on a fixed income, if you're a single parent, if you're on disability, or if you're just in a hard place. Please know that we would love everyone to join and study herbs. And this tuition assistance program allows you to study even if financially the other options don't work for you. So I really hope that you'll join. There's a bunch of frequently asked questions here that you can click on to learn more about this course and about how this program works. So there it is. Classes start on April 24th, and you can sign up before then. We will keep registration open until May 15th. We meet once a month live to chat about herbs, to talk about the module that we've just completed, to talk about the plant pairings that you've taken into your body, the medicine making, and all of that. So it's interactive as well as being didactic. So without further ado, first I want to start off with giving you some background into the work of she's really an anthropologist and archaeologist, but she's really an ethnographer, I feel like. Not specifically into botany, but into excavating ancient sites throughout what she calls Old Europe, which is like Greece and Turkey, and sort of all around the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea, sort of that whole area of Europe. She has excavated and has focused her work primarily on looking for the symbols around the goddess and the feminine and how those played a role in the culture that was dominant and was continuing to develop over a course of about 15 to 20,000 years. So a very large amount of time that we classically now call the Neolithic. So I came across the work of Marija Gimbutas because I had taken a class with an herbalist who focuses on the ancient scripts and works of herbalism, in medieval and even further back. And so in her transcripts, after the workshop was complete, she gave some links to additional resources. And one of those links was to the work of Marija Gimbutas. And once I listened to that, documentary on her life work in reclaiming the goddess in ancient culture, I was like hooked. It was like rabbit hole city. So that was about 2 months ago. And since that time, I purchased 2 of Marija Gimbutas' books, which I'm going to share with you today, as well as I've just been listening to podcast after podcast and really trying to dive into this historical work because we need it in the modern world. And I'll tell you why. And I talked about this a little bit in a previous podcast episode. So I will link that as well below, where I talk a little bit about the importance of the goddess archetype. But one of the reasons why I think it's so important now is that we're in a time where there is very little democracy, if you will. And I think a lot of people are feeling the pressure of feeling like we don't have a voice, and that the system, these larger systems, are set up in a way where the voice of the common person, and particularly women, is not being heard and not really being taken into consideration. And I feel this acutely when it comes to matters of the environment and environmental protection, environmental restoration, pulling funds out of our National Park Service, which is absolutely critical to the well-being of this land that we live on. And I personally feel right now that there is a threat to the land. And that, for me, as a woman and as a mother and as an herbalist, feels really acute. The land is vital for my well-being and not just my well-being as an individual, but for my well-being as a person connected to this larger network of women herbalists and healers. And I'm not saying I'm a healer, but I think that the energy of people who are interested in consciousness and preservation and spirituality, these are the people who are really feeling the weight of what is happening on this earth right now. This is important. The work of the past is important because to me, it gives me a glimpse of what women were doing before the Common Era, before what I'm going to call the patriarchy has come into being. And I am not saying patriarchy is nothing against men. It's about a system that doesn't include female voices. So I want to just give a little bit here about this idea of what Marija Gimbutas talked about when she was speaking about what she called gynocentric, couldn't read my own handwriting, a gynocentric culture or matriarchal. So a matriarchal culture is a woman-centered culture that existed in the Neolithic time, and it reigned for about 6 to 8,000 years. So between 10,000 BCE and 2000 BCE, there were about between 240 to 320 generations of humans like you and I who lived in a gynocentric world, which meant that men and women were seen as having equal value, but the leadership was under female rule. And the way that this worked during that time was that there was a single woman in each community who was the head of the community. And she was the head of the community, not because she was particularly strong or had great managerial qualities, but because of her spiritual openness. This was a woman who was selected by the people because she had the ability to be aware of the larger cycles of the seasons, and she had an innate capacity to be a conduit between the gods, goddesses, and earth. And around her was a priestesshood, a circle of other women who were also tapped into this energy, who supported the vision and the work of this matriarch. There were also men who were involved in this work. Often it was the uncle or the brother of the sort of, we'll call her a high priestess. She didn't have a name because this was a time when there wasn't a written language. Where Marija Gimbutas, she sort of pieced all this together through the ancient ruins, through sculpture, and through mostly the artwork of the people of that age. She pieced together this story of how the culture was put together. She also did a lot of work on funeral and burial sites. And, you can learn a lot about a people based on how they treated death and how they buried. You can tell a person's status, a lot about their status based on how they were buried. So that is how she pieced together this story and this idea of how the culture was run, because she found over 20,000 figurines of the female goddess in many different forms, as a bird goddess, as a snake goddess, as a water goddess, as a bear goddess. And so we'll talk about some of these images in this series, but the goddess in so many different forms. And there were some figurines she found of males, but very few. And the male figurines had more to do with reproduction. So it was more about the fertility cycle than it was about the male as something else, right? But what I think is so important is for me, at least in my mind, to know that for about maybe between 240 and 320 generations, this way of life prevailed. And under this rulership, there was peace. There were no weapons. There was no signs of war among the different villages that lived peacefully. There were signs of trading, and often the men were assigned to be the negotiators and the traders among different villages, and they often navigated the oceans and the ports in the different villages. So there was equally shared responsibility between the men and women. So it was a very, a very egalitarian, I guess, system that was set up. But because of the elevation of the goddess as the spiritual icon, everything was set up very differently. And as a result, and having a council of women who were not only connecting to the rhythms of the earth and the land, but they were also praying and giving offerings regularly to the goddesses of the sky and the bird goddesses, and to the underground goddesses of the snake. And there was just a lot, and to the god or goddess of the fire and the hearth, which was a huge symbol. I want to do a whole episode on fire and the hearth and how they viewed fire and the hearth as a symbol and as an energy that they worked very closely with. So that will come later too. But I think what we can take away from the work of Marija Gimbutas and a lot of the people that worked around her doing this excavation and this look into the feminine goddess, and I think her work really caught a lot of momentum in the 1970s and 80s with the rise of feminism. And I just want to say this, that I am a feminist as much as, in the fact that I believe that women are powerful, that women are important, our voices are absolutely critical right now. But I'm not a feminist in that I think women are better than men, or that I think that women are equal. I don't think women are equal to men. I think women are different and we have different qualities. And I also believe that there are gray spaces between the masculine and feminine, that there's places where these two really overlap. So for me, my embodiment of feminism is uplifting the voices and uplifting the perspective of the female in the world that to me feels very male centric and male dominated. And so I also do want to say in that, I also think it's important to lift up voices of people who float between. As one of my friends, Sarah Gillespie, says from her Cherokee ancestors, is that, she has twin souls, or she's considered a two-souled human, where she has a male and female equally in her body as she walks this earth. And she's probably one of the most powerful women who walks with male that male energy that I've ever met. She's like awesome. So she's actually, she's in a leadership role as part of her county. She sits on the city council, and she is an incredible force for equal rights and uplifting people's voices in her town in Georgia. Anyway, I just want to say that I think that there are so many more nuances to the feminist movement, and I want to give voice to that because I think that we need these voices to be heard. And at the same time that we need these voices to be heard externally. Even more importantly, and what I hope to address in this series is the importance of us to hear this voice internally, to embody the feminine in a fully empowered way, and to use the symbols of our ancient ancestors. And even if you don't hail from this old Europe area, these symbols are found in Africa and Egypt, Babylon. I mean, we see them also in Asia and in the Arctic, people that lived really far in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. We see these symbols in Aboriginal Australian art as well. So regardless of where your genetic line comes from, these are ancient symbols that humans, us, our united ancestors, saw as being powerful vessels and vehicles through which to explore the underside of our consciousness. So I am really excited to go into this with you and to start with the symbol of the egg. And the egg is a symbol that we see really profoundly throughout many different cultures. And we see it in a lot of different creation myths. And all of the creation myths, very interestingly and not surprisingly, have to do with an egg and water and some animal. So we see this egg as the creative potential, and then we see it in the bath of water, which is the giver of life. And then we also see some animating force, whether it's a snake or a bird, giving it, giving it animation and bringing it all the way into fruition and into bloom. So let me just start. I want to start with, let me grab my notes, the primordial creation story. And so one of the places we see this is on ceremonial vases, which were shaped like eggs. So the inside of these vases were carved into or were formed out of clay into an egg shape. And then they had a bird head on them, showing the connection to the bird. And then some of these vases also had snake motifs that wrapped around them. These were often represented as circles, and often the water was represented as wavy lines. So let me just show you some images. So this is one book of Marija Gimbutas, The Goddess and Gods of Old Europe. And I remember one of the podcasts I listened to, they were talking about how when she went to publish this book, they would not let her put goddesses first. They were fighting with her to put the word God, so gods and goddesses. And she fought back. She said, this book is about the goddess. This book is full, primarily goddesses. So I'm not going to use the word gods as first because gods are the second in order. And so she won the fight. So now we have the goddesses and gods of old Europe. And so I just wanted to read this to you, and then I'll show you the images from this book. So she says, ancient mythologies, Egyptian, Babylonian, Hindu, Greek, have preserved myths of the universe as a cosmic egg from which gods arise and which creation by a cosmic snake or bird. First of all was water. From the water emerged a snake with the head of both a lion and a bull. Between these was the face of a giant, Hercules or Kronos. The giant created an egg, and the egg split in two. From the upper part came the sky, and the lower part the earth. And this is from a book she quotes. Some 5,000 years before, the Athenagoras myth could have gone something like this. So this is her interpret. So that was the first written myth that we see in the 2nd century AD, and this was recorded in the Athenagoras myth. So she imagines before this written myth, it might have looked something like this. First, all was water. From the water emerged a cosmic snake with a horned head. The snake or the bull or the giant created the cosmic egg. Then the egg split in two. The cosmic egg may also be laid by the water bird, which is a universal myth found throughout Africa and the Arctic zones. So let me just show you some of these images of the cosmic egg. So here we have the egg, and it's interesting that a lot of times the egg is shown as two, that there's either a repeating pattern of one or a repeating pattern of two. And then she did a lot of work looking at symbols and lines and saying that basically one of her hypotheses is that all of these images that we find on these old pieces of pottery and clay and painted on caves in the Neolithic time was a language of itself. So it was a pre-alphabetic language. It was a symbolic language. So these wavy lines represent water. So we see the water, we see the egg, and then we also, as this wraps around, we see the image of the snake here. And you can see it also in this pottery. She blows this up, and you can see that the snake wrapping around. And anytime we see this sort of cascading mark, this is the sign of water. So we're going to do another episode on just water and the symbolism of water in the Neolithic time and what that represented and some of the stories she tells. But let me just show you here. Look at all these different interpretations of the egg. So what she shows in these different examples from these ancient vases is that you have the egg, and in the middle of the egg, sometimes you'll see the cross. And the cross was a very, very common symbol. It represents the four seasons. And so the cross can show up here. It is the X, but it also can show up, and here's the X here, and here's the cross here. So we have the four directions, we have the four seasons, we have also the cycles of life and birth and death and regeneration. We can also see the spiral sometimes. We can see inside of the egg here. This is the spiral. That symbol shows up a lot. And the spiral is the snake again. So there are a lot of these images come, they come in and out of these different, you'll see these symbols show up again and again in different ways, but they're kind of pointing to similar motifs. She also talks about this crisscross or egg or this X mark as being the engagement of the life force. And we see this X shape in different places. We see it on the tip of the penis. We see this X shape when you're making an ingrain, marking a seed from which the bud or the sprout will come out. So the X is also something that marks the emergence or the awakening of life. And we see that in a lot of places as well. So we have, let me just see if there was, so here is a clay pot of the egg. And this is the bird head, but on the inside of it, it's completely rounded. So this was a vase that they used in ceremony, a bird-shaped vase with a bird-shaped head. Here is one with wings and a tail down below. So the symbol of the egg, as we can imagine, has to do with this container that sprouts life. And in this way, it is a house in which transformation and growth can happen. And so I think it's really important to think about when we're working with the symbol of the egg, and this is something I'm going to invite you to do now in your own life. And this can be done either through drawing, sculpting, whittling, or like carving circular shapes, working with the egg as a symbol by planting seeds or sprouting seeds, maybe even doing bean sprouts to eat, but just thinking about the seed or the egg as a symbol and engaging in it. I think the process right now in the springtime, we're sort of in this cocoon. There's a lot of energy moving within the confines of the egg, but it isn't time to necessarily break out of the egg yet. We know that if a little baby bird or chick or if a baby snake breaks out of the shell too quickly before it's fully developed, it will die. And in the same way, our own creative process needs to fully develop before it breaks through. And so the symbol of the egg isn't just about life force and then breaking free, but it's about the protective container of. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, I have I've been having a lot of creative inspiration coming through me. I don't know if this is because of my astrological transits, if it's because I'm moving from my midlife into my later years, as I'm moving into perimenopause and this later stage of my own womanhood. But what I have been really acutely aware of is that there is a impulse in so many of us, I think women creatives, to rush into projects and to rush into expansion too quickly. So, what is the gas pedal and what is the brake pedal? And how do we really enjoy the process of holding back and holding in our creative impulse until it's just the right time? Just the right time. So that way, that little chick or that little baby snake or that little butterfly is completely and fully formed. The thing is that it's uncomfortable. And there's this beautiful Anais Nin quote that says, the pain that it took to stay tightly closed in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And so there's this really fine line when your internal creative process is coming into fullness. It's like that flower bud on the tree. It's so full. And it's painfully holding itself back until boom, it just opens up. Boom. And when it opens up, there's this release, but everything has been fully developed. So I just bring this as a question to you. What is it that you are working to develop right now? And are you taking enough time to nurture that seed in the dark, to nurture it privately before you launch it publicly? And I think in the world today, especially with social media, there's this pressure to always show everyone what you're doing, to always be like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, and to give yourself away before you're ready. And when you do that, I feel that part of the power gets lost. And so it is harder to complete that project once you've given it away. And I'm not saying that if you're a creative, I know that part of what you might have to do is give little peeks, right? I'm working on this. But then you know what you can do? Stay tuned. I'm going to give you this, but I'm not going to give it all. I'm going to give you a little taste. Then I'm going to come back. I'm going to work that project. And then when it's complete, when it's full, then I'll offer it back out. And then I am full and you are full. And neither of us gets depleted in that process. Does that make sense to you? I hope I'm speaking, I hope I'm speaking this clearly, because in my heart, this feels like such an important message for this moment. What else do I want to say about the egg? I also want to say that one interesting way that the egg shows up in the Neolithic time is as a tomb. So the egg can also be a symbol of death, because in the ancient cultures, the way that they viewed the processes and the cycle of life and death is that we come from the egg and then we go back to the egg to become regenerated so that our soul can be reborn into another body. And we see this present in a lot of the burial sites found in this old Europe, in a lot of different tombs throughout old Europe. And in particular, there was this one site that I thought was so interesting. So this is in the Mediterranean. They cut into the stone a spiral shape. And in the spiral were these egg-shaped tombs. And they were sort of spread out in a circle. And then they would dig deeper, a layer down, and then there would be egg-shaped tombs below. And so based on the archaeology in these digs, they emphasize that over the course of several centuries, and most people didn't live 100 years, they lived maybe 40, maybe 50 years at most. So this would be over the course of 5 to 6 generations. People were digging this spiral into the stone and creating these egg-shaped tombs and placing their bodies of their loved ones in these tombs under the earth, with the idea, and this is something that they held to be true, we can see it in their art, that by placing the body back into the egg, it gets reborn. And this was, everywhere in nature, we see signs of rebirth. It's just, you can't deny that death is only a part of the cycle, that there is a rebirth. Now, religiously, there's a lot of different ideas. Cosmologically, there's a lot of different ideas, but it is agreed upon that there is some afterlife. There is some next phase beyond death. And so to these ancient people, the rebirth was part of that rebirth was by being buried back in a fetal position in these little egg tombs. And it feels so reassuring to me, because we live in a culture that is so death phobic. We are so focused on birthing things and then keeping those things young as long as we can and maintaining them. And then the death part and the rebirth part is like, la, 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 la. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. But why? Like I tell my girls this all the time. When we were on spring break, we went to St. John in the US Virgin Islands, and there's chickens everywhere. This is the bird and the egg. So there's chickens and there's chicks everywhere, just running down the street, at the restaurants, pool deck, everywhere. And there was a little chicken who was dead and on the road. So we walked by this little dead chicken corpse every day. And every day we saw its body decompose. And my younger daughter, Summer, who's 6, she was asking about it. She's like, what happened? Well, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but maybe it got sick. Maybe it never fully developed. Maybe it got hit or hurt or injured. Maybe it couldn't find food. So, the why was the first question. Why did this thing die? So, we create story. That's what we do as humans. Let's create some stories about what happened. Then the body started decomposing. And then my daughter said, is it okay? She suddenly becomes aware that this was alive. It had a soul. What is happening to that soul? Is that little soul okay? To which we humans have story. And so the story that I tell is, yes, of course it's okay. It's not in its body anymore. The body is going back to the earth to be regenerated. And that little chicken's soul or spirit is now a part of something bigger. I don't know exactly how it works. I don't pretend to have these answers, but here are some ideas. Either that little chicken soul went into the air and is becoming the breath that we breathe. It's becoming that plant. It's becoming all of these other things that are animate. Or maybe that soul went into some ethereal space and it will get reborn into another body. Maybe right now it's being reborn into another chicken body, into an egg. Maybe it's being reborn into a dog body, and maybe both are happening. Maybe the body, as it's decomposing, and then by day 4, she was like, ew, that's really gross, Mom. Why is it still here? And it's like, well, because that body has to decompose to go back into the earth. And I want you to notice how there's some feathers and little fuzz being moved around. Do you see how the ants are eating the flesh? And it's providing food for these ants who are communal creatures, who have a whole system and have a whole family structure. And this has become a source of nourishment that they can feed themselves and maybe feed their babies and bring into their nest. And then that creates more life. And it fertilizes the soil as they drop little pieces of its body as they bring it back to its little ant, its little ant hole or mound, and then, by 5 days later, it was completely gone. And my daughter said, well, where did it go? And it went back. It regenerated itself. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't it beautiful that this being that came into a body left its body, but all of it has disappeared and gone back into this great mystery of life, this great circle of life. And so, I take such comfort in death and knowing that when I die, it's not an end. It's just a part of the birth, death, and regenerative cycle. And, I think to think about it as rebirth, I don't know, that feels a little limiting, because then it makes me think, oh, well, I have to be born into a body. But the regenerative cycle that Marija Gimbutas spoke of, and how she thought these ancient people viewed it was just regenerative. We don't know, but it doesn't matter, because all life is sacred. All life is important. Every single piece and parcel of this life is sacred and is a gift. So no matter where your parts go, It's all part of this beautiful circle of life. And lucky us, blessed us to be a part of it. So, gosh, I love this work. Okay, so I'm going to try to wrap it up here because I have a few little additional takeaways and tidbits for you to think about. So, the first one is the symbol of the egg as the creative process, as the shell, as the protector. So, take that with you and think about how you are protecting and building ideas and creative expressions in a very closed container. The second one is I want you to literally find and look for symbols of the egg in your life. Look for how the egg shows up in your, in your errands, just in art. Just watch for symbols of the egg in nature, especially here in spring. It's everywhere, everywhere, the egg. And then third, to think about nurturing eggs in your environment, whether that is seeds, gardening, growing microgreens, right? Like, is there a way that you can engage in that regenerative process of letting things come into life from a seed or from an egg? And then the last thing I wanted to say about the death process of the egg is that one of the stones, this is kind of interesting, in Ireland, they found these beautiful mounds in, it's called New Grange, Ireland, the New Grange mounds. And these were created as a burial and both burial and regenerative mounds. And they found that they must have brought these beautiful white quartz stones from over 40 miles away because they don't exist in that particular geographic area. They must have been brought in. So thousands and thousands, they said about, 2 to 300 tons of these white quartz were brought in. This beautiful mound was built of earth, and then these quartz stones were laid on top of these mounds to symbolize an egg. And that's where people would go to pray. It's where I mean, we don't know exactly, but it was a very sacred site for these ancient people who lived in Ireland. And so I had the idea of white quartz, which is like kind of a lot of places. And even if you have just like a quartz crystal that's a little bit smoky or has a little bit of white on it, to maybe use that for the next few weeks as something that you can hold as a sacred item to just feel the charge of the quartz, of the symbol of the egg. And if you can find a white quartz in an egg shape, like that would be even more spectacular. Or if you could carve it yourself into an egg shape, then you get like double points. But to maybe even call upon the symbol and the energetic potentiating qualities of the quartz, because quartz is like very magnifying for energies, and you can use that when you do your meditation. You can do that when you're falling asleep, like place it on your heart or on your belly, put it under your pillow, but maybe working with the white quartz as something to help you really feel into this symbol of the egg. And one of the things about the symbol, and this is something that James Hillman spoke a lot about when he spoke about symbols, and he was a colleague of Marija Gimbutas at Pacifica, is it Pacifica University or the Pacifica Institute, I think, in Santa Barbara, California. But James Hillman said the symbol doesn't have to be dissected, that there's something that when we try to pull it apart and dissect it, it becomes dead. It's like doing an autopsy. So if we want the symbol to stay alive, there has to be some mystery and there has to be parts of it that we can't decipher. So I leave that with you as the final image, is the image of the egg, the image of the round, the image of enclosure, the image of gestation, the image of potentization, the image of protection. All of these in the egg, and however you can hold that egg image, whether it's making Easter eggs or painting eggs, hold that for a while. Let yourself meditate and ruminate on the egg and see what happens. So with that, I bid you adieu. I realize right now I didn't give you any herbs to sit with, but I don't have a specific plants, but I do have seeds. So look for seeds that are round. You could even think about bulbs, a lot of our onion bulbs or garlic bulbs, things that are round in nature, and tend those. That is your herbal work, is just look for seeds and caretake them, whether it's sprouting them, growing them, eating them, or just holding them. Okay. So thank you for watching. I would love to hear your comments. Let me know what came up for you as you listen to this. And if things come up later on, please come back and add your comments as well. The book that I wanted, I'll include some links to where you can find these books. They're out of print, but you can find them on eBay. This one is the Goddesses and Gods of Old Europe. And then this is another one. I think it might be mirrored for you all. So if it's backwards, I apologize. This one's called The Language of the Goddess, and it's a foreword by Joseph Campbell. Just beautiful, beautiful images. So we'll talk more about the bird and water goddesses in future episodes. Let me know if you liked this and if you want more too, because yeah, I love to hear it if these topics are resonating. So I hope to see you in my upcoming herbal apprenticeship. Click on the link below to learn more about the Year 1 Herbal Foundations course, a full year of study where you get to learn about the vitalist tradition and using herbs to support your inner vital force. And we'll see you in the next episode. All right. Bye, everyone.